Should I Stay or Should I Go? One of the great songs by The Clash from 1979, 1980. That is the question that so many men come to me with. Should I stay or should I go? Their marriage is definitely falling apart, but there's a lot to lose whether they stay or they leave. And so the pain of leaving and the financial loss, of course, is being weighed constantly against the pain of staying. So today I want to talk about exactly what's at stake with staying. Because I think that a lot of guys believe that the cost of leaving is so much greater. And I'm not so sure about that. So let's talk about it. There's a lot of misconceptions about why marriages go bad. A lot of people think that it's some huge event that happens. And sometimes when we talk about our marriages, there is some huge event that happened that triggers the final destruction of the marriage. But the truth of the matter is the marriage went bad long, long, long before that. I look for, events in history that kind of serve as really great metaphors. And one of the great metaphors, I think, is how World War I started with the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. Everyone thinks that's what triggered World War I. And the event actually, could be held responsible for the beginning of World War I. But prior to that, there was an enormous amount of nationalism and political maneuvering and insults given and one thing after another. I mean, it wasn't just this one assassination that caused it. It was leading up to an event regardless. This was just the event that caused it. And the same is true with your divorce. It started subtly, and then it got worse and worse and worse, and it wasn't resolved until finally one day it explodes into some big fight that causes you to face a divorce for the first time, or to face a divorce and the destruction of your marriage and really your whole life up to that point. I remember subtle signs of my own marriage. Things that I knew something was wrong, but I wasn't sure what it was. And it's like kicking a beehive, or a hornet's nest. You're like, now I'm pretty sure there's some hornets in there. Do I want to actually kick it to find out? And so as a man, you think, okay, she's having a bad day. I'm just going to let it be. I'm just going to let it go. Well, with women, you can't do that because they're trying to get you to read their mind. And that's the thing that most men don't realize, is that women fully expect that you are constantly in some kind of psychic connection with their brain, and that you have knowledge about what's going on in that mysterious little hole in their head. There's nothing you can do about it. So the only thing you can do is to just assume at all times that there is something going on, that there's something wrong. If you make that assumption, you will be right 90% of the time. I remember in my own marriage, the first sign was, it's like when she's cleaning and not talking. She's rushing around the house, cleaning and not talking to me. And she seems quite agitated that she's cleaning and I'm not. And she's not telling me something. And I'm sure what she means to tell me, this is 30 years later, like I should be asking her, honey, what do you need me to do? I've only worked for the last 5 days. This is my first day off. And I'm going to sit here and watch football for a little while. But no, you need to step up to the plate and you need to ask her, honey, what's wrong? How can I help you? And then you get the answer. The next sign that I had that my marriage was in trouble is when going to bed. This is the time when you know there's something wrong because you're laying right next to her and she's facing away from you and not talking. This is another one of those times where you got to read her mind and you got to assume that there is something wrong, because there is. If she's not talking to you in bed, she's not just yammering away, there's something wrong. Keep in mind, guys, women talk by default all the time. And if she's not talking, that's an indication. That's your sign that something's wrong. So you could seem like a superhero, like you've got the psychic ability to read women's minds, if they stop talking for even a few minutes. You say, is there something wrong? Because there is, I guarantee it. Women's default setting is something is probably wrong. And so if you just go with that assumption, you're gonna be well off. As men, like I said, if somebody's not talking, we just assume they're like a man, they're just in their head, they're just in their thoughts, they're considering something, they're, I don't know, reflecting, or maybe there's just nothing, you know? I can't tell you how many times she's asked me, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm just not talking, there's nothing wrong. Debu, come back here, come. What are you doing, man? This dog is a lot. Like I said, if you're like most men, you didn't ask, and so you didn't find out, and she's assumed that you were the wrong man for her. Now, she didn't think that whole thought in that moment, but she was starting to think it, you know? There's this old metaphor about how you boil a frog. I think I mentioned in another video, and I don't know if this is true or not. I've never actually tried it, but you put a frog in boiling water and he'll jump right out. I assume that he wouldn't be killed by the boiling water. But anyway, let's just go with the metaphor. But if you put him in cold water and then you slowly turn up the heat, over a period of time, that frog will sit there and boil. I don't know if that's actually true, but I think it's actually a really cool metaphor for how things go bad in a marriage. So you are sitting there in cold water just as comfy as you can be, just loving life. And as you don't respond to her subtle cues that there's something wrong, that water starts to get warmer. Yeah, it gets warmer and warmer and warmer. And as men, we don't really notice it, you know? It starts off, you think, okay, well, she's having a bad day, so I'm just not going to say anything. I don't want to upset her. Or, wow, she's really kind of in a foul mood lately. This has been going on for a while. Maybe I should, talk to her a little bit. Nah, she'll get over it, She's got her friends or whatever. She doesn't need me to intervene. Hey, pal, we don't need your barking. So that water just keeps getting warmer and warmer and warmer until finally it reaches a boiling point. And then you're going to hear the complaints coming. And almost all of these complaints are things that you're going to be hearing for the first time. And you're not going to have had any idea that there was anything wrong, that everything seemed fine to you. You realize she was in a bad mood or whatever, but you didn't realize that she was in a bad mood because you weren't reading her mind and asking her what she needed you to do on her behalf. This is the I'm not happy paradox. So she's not happy. You have to know she's not happy. And when you know she's not happy, you need to find some way to fix it. And if you can't fix it, or if you can't be aware of her unhappiness on some level and realize that you're responsible for it, then you will be responsible for it. So there's no way around this. You're either going to have to be psychic or just continually ask her all the time, honey, what's wrong? Honey, what's wrong? Because I guarantee you there's something wrong. And she'll tell you in no short order exactly what you're doing wrong. Recently, I had the opportunity to talk to a viewer who is really in a terrible level of hell with his marriage. And have you ever heard of the Chinese finger trap? Where you stick your fingers in the two ends of this tube, and the minute you try to pull them out, the tube collapses in on your fingers, making it impossible for you to get out. That's kind of the situation he's in. On the one hand, the marriage is so bad, he can't stay in it. I mean, it's just miserable, and she is miserable, and he is miserable, and it just sucks on every single level. I mean, I could go into some details, but most of you guys can imagine. It's just untenable. There's just no staying in this marriage. Staying in it has caused him over the last year to gain like 60 pounds. Just listening to him talk, I could tell his sanity was being strained to its limit. He broke down and cried on several occasions in our conversation. And that's not something that most men will do in front of other men that are relative strangers, you know, as he's pouring his guts out to me about how bad this marriage is. But on the other hand, he can't leave because she's got him by the short hairs. They have a disabled child who's very young, like 3 years old. And he's afraid that if he leaves her with this child, that this child will be poisoned against him for the rest of his life. And not to mention that she will, you know, take him to court, you know, in family court, and family court will, you know, essentially erase him financially. And so he's stuck. One way or the other, no matter what he does, from his perspective right now, it feels like he can't do anything to relieve the pressure. And I tried to guide him through it. I tried to advise him that he just needed to go, that taking the short-term loss financially, and then do everything he can to build a relationship with his son after the fact is probably his best option. Because the other option, and I think this is the part that most people don't realize, is once you lose your health physically and psychologically, you've lost everything. Like you have lost the whole game. There's no regaining that a lot of the times. And once a marriage turns to that point where you feel like you are trapped and you are so miserable that you can't find a path forward no matter what, then chances are that's your sign that you must get out. The solution to walk out is far better than to stay. The problem that a lot of us guys have is we take our vows really seriously. And that whole for better, for worse thing, we swallow that whole. And we start off with the assumption that when things start going bad, that this is the worst part. And we also assume that things will get better. We think that if we put some effort into it, that if we try, we have conversations, we go to therapy, we do all the things we're supposed to do, that things will go better. That rarely works. Now, it does work sometimes, so it's worth a shot, because if you got even one shot in 1,000, maybe it's worth doing. But it rarely works. Once a woman has turned against you, it's like if an animal turns against you. You know, if your dog attacks you, you can't keep that dog. Like if that dog comes after you directly, you can't keep that dog. The same is true for a woman. If she attacks you directly and she shows disrespect and she's decided that you are the enemy in her life, there is no fixing that. And so you've got to have the courage to quit. You've got to have the courage to walk away from this thing. Because if you stay with it, it's going to cost you everything. Not just your money, not just a relationship with your child, but it's going to cost you your whole life. You know, the longer you stay, the worse it gets. Just like with the Chinese finger trap, the best way to resolve this is to release the tension on your fingers, release the tension on the relationship. Bring the tenor of the conversation down to some level of rational, discourse, whatever you can achieve. I know this is very hard sometimes, especially when things are hard or bad, but you've got to bring that discourse down to something rational and calm and stop thinking about maintaining the relationship and start thinking about the future and start talking to her about the future. The secret to getting inside a woman's head is when you start talking to her about what's in the best interests of the children. That is the trigger that will allow her to be more rational in her conversations with you. Because you have a future as divorced parents, and that child has a future with both of you. And if you can tap into that energy, into that relationship, then you have a chance to resolve this in a way that it will limit the pain to you, limit the pain to your children, and get you out of this thing as cleanly and effectively and efficiently as possible. Admitting defeat in a marriage is a really, really, really hard thing to do, especially for men. Because we attach so much of our identity to our ability to have this relationship. There's a certain amount of external validation that we get from this. As we mature from young men into mature men, part of that process is having a relationship with a woman, being accepted into that world of civilization where you are a contributing member, and having a wife and raising a family is all part of that picture. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out a lot of the time. There are three kinds of marriages. There's about 47-48% who get divorced. There's about 35 to 40% who are miserable. And there's 10% or so that actually have a reasonably healthy relationship. Getting into that 10% requires an enormous amount of work, luck. You know, there's just so much luck that goes into it. It really is. And if you're in that other 90% and you feel that there's relationship is not salvageable, that it's untenable, then you have to see your life as a continuum. And this is just one chapter in the story. And this chapter has taught you enormous lessons. Take these lessons. Don't ruminate over the details of what went wrong. Just allow the emotions to pass. Look at it logically and rationally. And let this go. Get yourself out and start over. A clean slate will clear your head and give you the opportunity to decide what to do next. But so long as you are snared in this Chinese finger trap where you can't go and you can't stay, you are going to be, you're going to be miserable. You know, you won't be able to think straight. You won't be able to make decisions for yourself. Emotions are going to run your mind. And when that happens, the chances of you doing the right thing turn to zero. They just turn to zero. So I strongly recommend, if you're in that Chinese finger trap and you're not sure if you should stay or you should go, Clash, one of my favorite songs, but yeah, you should go. That's the answer. That is absolutely the answer. A clean slate, clear head, better decisions, a new life. Learn from it. If you want to get married again, you'll go at it from a much different perspective. You'll have a whole different set of criteria. You'll be a much wiser man next time around. And if you decide you want to be single, you will not take your single life for granted. You will see the opportunities for joy and happiness as a single guy. I guarantee it. The relief that you feel when this relationship is done will be palpable. It'll be a visceral sense of, oh my God, I feel so much better just being away from her. So don't deny yourself that opportunity. I'm telling you. I know it's hard to imagine right now, but I guarantee you it's there. All right, you guys, that's all I got for you today. I certainly hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please like and subscribe. If you know some guys that are going through some difficult times in their marriage and they're not sure what to do, please share this with them. You know, I think that a lot of guys are like the viewer that I talked to last week, and they're just stuck and they don't know what to do. And more often than not, leaving is the best option. All right, thanks very much. See you next time. Remember, stay healthy, and if you can, stay single.